All right, super. Welcome everyone to our January 12th Oceanside Board of Education meeting. I'm going to call the meeting to order at 6:05 p.m. And I will start with a roll call. So I'll just say your name and you say here. So I'll start with Vice President Eric Joyce.
Present.
Present. Recorder Raquel Alvarez.
Present.
Trustee Mike Blessing.
Present.
And Trustee Eleanor Evans.
Here.
All right, super. We did a roll call. So our next item is 2B. It's a public report of action taken in closed session. Bear with me, this one is long.
Stacy, do remember that they are two.
Yes, I
separate
do
items.
remember there's two.
Thank
So
you.
we'll start with the first one. Public employee appointment, Associate Superintendent of Business Services. I have good news. The board unanimously voted to appoint Andy Norman as the Associate Superintendent Business Services. That's item one. The next item, item C, which is the approval of employment agreement with Associate Superintendent of Business Services. So bear with me, this one's long. This approval of this agreement, I need to read the Brown Act, which the Brown Act requires the governing board, prior to taking final action on an employment agreement, to orally report a summary of a recommendation for the salaries, salary schedule, or compensation paid in the form of fringe benefits for local agency executives. The Associate Superintendent of Business Services is a local agency executive, and a proposal contract is before us this evening. The proposed contract will be for a term to commence on January 13th, 2021 through June 30th, 2023. The Associate Superintendent of Business Services will receive an annual salary of $176,500. The Associate Superintendent of Business Services will additionally be eligible to receive a $7,523 stipend for earning a doctoral degree. In addition, the Associate Superintendent of Business Services will be eligible to receive a longevity payment as a percentage of her base pay based on years of experience in a district management position. The Associate Superintendent of Business Services will be allowed to receive or purchase health, dental, and/or life insurance as offered to management personnel. I'll call for a motion.
I'll move approval.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Mike and Eleanor. Any discussion or questions? Nope. I'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right, moving on to item 2D, student representatives. Unfortunately tonight, my favorite part, we have no reports since our students have only been back for one day. So there's nothing to report at this time, and we look forward to them at our February meeting. Moving on to item 2E, the approval of the agenda. I'll call for a motion.
I'll make that
Move
motion.
to approve.
Thanks, Eleanor, and a second from Eric Joyce. Thank you very much. Any discussion, questions? All right, I'll call for the vote. All in favor of approving the agenda?
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion carries 5-0. So the next item is the superintendent's report. Dr. Vitale?
Thank you, Dr. Begin. I'm excited to acknowledge the following teachers for their National Board certification in literacy, reading, language arts, early and middle childhood. And they're with us here this evening, Meredith and Catherine. So we have Catherine DuPont from San Luis Rey Elementary School. And Catherine, wave to us, give us a wave, yay. They don't want to say anything, but they did agree to give us a wave. And Meredith McCain is with us, who teaches at Laurel Elementary. Meredith, give us a wave. And also Julie Erickson, who works at Laurel Elementary. And Julie is on the call. She just didn't want to give us a wave. And that's okay, Julie, we love you anyway. And Stacy, I wondered if you wanted to make any comments. I know in your day job, you work with National Board certifying and doing the certification and teaching. So I wondered if you wanted to say a few words as to the amount of effort and this endeavor that these ladies took on during this pandemic time.
Well, we have several teachers in Oceanside that are currently going through the National Board certification process. These 3 individuals just happened to finish it. And I have to give them a shout out because not only did they go through this rigorous process of looking at their teaching practice, honing their practice, working with their students, and then doing all the copious amount of writing that goes with it. They did it during a pandemic. So they've had to do things using distance learning. Their timelines have been faster. I mean, you guys, I'm so proud of you. The 3 of you, you're such an asset to our district. So thank you for that hard work. And they do have different certificate areas. So I didn't know if Catherine or Meredith wanted to share what they certified in, but they are definitely go-getters. So thank you. I hope you guys talk to your colleagues about giving it a shot as well.
Thank you very much for joining us, ladies, and congratulations.
Congrats.
Congratulations.
That is all I have, Stacy.
All right, super. Thanks for the good news. It's always good to have some. So we'll go to item board reports. So do I have any board members? Just give me a sign with your hand if you want to share. Start off
No
with the board
report for
report.
me, Stacy.
All right, thanks, Mike. All right, Eric, you're on.
Evening, everyone. I just wanted to give a quick update. I met with a lot of legislators, and there's a lot of fast-moving legislation coming our way. The governor put out something, and then our representatives at the state government will have their response and their action in that arena as well. And all of that's going to have a tremendous impact on our schools. So I would ask everyone take some time over the next week to write their legislator and let them know what your priorities are for education and what your priorities are for how we move forward. Like, they need to hear your voice to make the best decisions they can. And so I would encourage everyone to reach out. We have some great representatives that are willing to listen. So take the time and let them know, or reach out to us and we'll pass it along as well. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric, for the reminder. Raquel or Eleanor?
I have nothing at this time. Thank you.
I don't have a report at this time.
All right, thank you. I just wanted to say thank you to our adult transition program. I was lucky enough to attend the graduation ceremony they had on December 16th. It was a drive-through one, but it was really special for those 3 amazing students. So thank you for that staff for doing all that legwork. All right, we're moving on.
I did have one thing. Sorry, I did forget something. I want to give a shout out to Nutritional Services. We did a turkey drop to some of our families within our district, and thanks to TC and OPD in the city of Oceanside, Parks and Recs, and a couple of other different groups that helped out with donating to our families, as far as even our cheerleaders from Oceanside High School who did a collection of toys for our families, which was amazing because they came through big. And thank you to everybody that participated, even community members that saw the event happening. They came over with things for our families and last minute, which was amazing to see within our community. I think that was the most heartfelt thing for me, seeing that whole thing and everybody coming together during the pandemic and making this all happen very quickly for our families. And just thank you so much for everybody that helped and participated in that. To all our families out there, again, just continue to know that we are here and we are hearing, and know that we are listening to everything that you are telling us. So thank you.
Thanks, Raquel. I'm glad you got to share that. That was a lot of work. All right, so our next item is the general consent items. I'll call for a motion to approve those.
I'll move approval of items A through R on the consent item.
Thanks,
Consent
Mike.
calendar.
And I got a second from Eric Joyce. I saw his hand go up. Any discussion? Nope. All right, I'll call for the vote. All in favor of approving the general consent items, say aye.
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 All right, they're approved 5-0. So moving on, we don't have presentation or personnel. We're moving on to item 8, curriculum and instruction. Item A, approval to purchase equipment for the El Camino High School building and construction pathway. Staff presentation.
Good evening. Board. Thank you so much for all of your good wishes to our community. We're very excited to say that we have teaching and learning continuing in our CTE program. This item is for an update of obsolete materials at our wood shop at El Camino High School with CTIG funding at no cost to the district. This is $69,500 worth of new equipment for wood shop at El Camino High School.
Excellent. Any questions or discussion, board?
That sounds awesome.
That's great. All right, well then I will look for a motion to approve.
I'll make the
to
motion.
approve.
All right, I have a first from Eleanor and a second from Raquel. I'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, motion passes 5-0. More good news. That's great.
Just add in, I really would like an invite to come work in the wood shop when it gets up and running. Just, I like all my thumbs, so I'll need a little training again. Work with the
I got a
saw.
tie rack that I made in 7th grade. I need to update. So me too.
You
For
guys
all
are funny.
eyes, Mike, right.
All right, the next item is update on COVID-19 and reopening schools for our in-person instruction. So I'll turn that over to Dr. Levy.
Yeah, so while we're bringing up the presentation, thank you, Mr. Moon, for doing that. And while Dr. Levy will be doing the bulk of the presentation, I will just begin. So this is a presentation ultimately for the board to consider options for returning to in-person learning. So on the next slide, we just want to remind the board that we did have an emergency board meeting on December 10th, 2020. And at that board meeting, we made the decision to pivot elementary schools to virtual learning beginning December 14th, and to reevaluate the situation at our January 12th board meeting. And this is what we're doing tonight. We're reevaluating the situation for elementary at our January 12th board meeting. We also made the decision to continue secondary schools in virtual learning according to the CDPH guidelines and the Blueprint for Safer Economy, and to reassess secondary schools when the county re-enters the red tier. And just a reminder, our secondary schools have not opened for in-person learning. And so according to those guidelines, they may not reopen until we are in the red tier. So we will reevaluate that when our secondary schools are in the red tier. So tonight, it's completely about elementary school. And so on this slide, we are just giving an update. So what has changed since December 10th? Sorry. 3 things that have changed since December 10th. Governor Newsom held a press conference on December 30th. We have local case rate information, and people are probably very aware with what's happening worldwide and nationwide. We'll talk about some local information, and then we'll share some information on attendance and just what we've seen in virtual and in hybrid learning. And then we're going to share different information on options for the boards to consider for elementary learning. So on the next slide is just a really brief overview of the governor's proposal that he gave in December. Since then, he has given his proposal for the budget, which he did on Friday. And we're all in the process of attending various meetings to get the specifics of what that really means for K-12. But this proposal that people may have heard about that came out in December is truly just the governor's proposal. And the additional funding that he mentions in this proposal is pending legislative approval and would need legislative approval and does not currently have legislative approval. The best way to describe that funding is that it's a Prop 98 carve out. We already have a minimum amount of funding that we are guaranteed through Prop 98. The reason that this is called a carve out is because it is not new funding and is a bit reminiscent of categoricals that we've had years past. And so that money that he is proposing that we carve out for different mitigation as far as shrinking cohort, weekly testing for students and staff, and other items. It could also be used for addressing learning gaps, paying down deferrals, or providing additional support for CalPERS and CalSTRS contributions. So again, the proposal was just that, it was a proposal. And what I wanna make clear, and we'll repeat this later, is that the options that we've created and are presenting tonight are not attached to this governor's proposal. Everything that we're proposing tonight, we're able to fund through the federal CARES dollars. And we'll restate that a couple of times. We didn't want to ignore the governor's proposal, but we want to make clear that our proposals tonight are not attached to this and are funded through CARES. So with that, Dr. Lovey, if you will take us into the rest of the presentation.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Vitale. So we wanted to make sure we continuously update the board and community on our local case rates and triggers for modifying the health orders. On your screen, you will see that there is a chart that is used by the San Diego Public Health Department to monitor the local conditions with COVID-19. Of these items, there are 13 different data points, but there are 3 that are of particular interest to us in our district. The first one is the item number 1, the case rates per 100,000. In order to be in the red, you need to be under 7 per day for 100,000 residents. In December, the rate was 15.3 cases per 100,000. On the 9th of December, it was 27 cases per 100,000. And the most current report put San Diego County's case rate at 54 per 100,000 residents. And that was reported on Monday. We also want to look at community outbreaks, which is the data point number 2. The threshold for this is less than 7 community outbreaks. On Monday, the number of community outbreaks was 45. This is a lesser number than there were reported on December 6th, but again, well above that threshold of 7 community outbreaks. The third piece of data that we'd like to look closely at is number 10. And number 10 is our positivity rate for all COVID-19 tests that are being administered. The threshold for this indicator is to be below 8% positivity rate. In December, the rates were 8.4 on our first data set. On December 6th, 9.4, and on yesterday, again, it was reported at 16.3. So these are, again, higher than the threshold. And what we also know is that we are currently in San Diego County having over 20,000 COVID tests administered each and every day. The hope was that as more tests are administered, that your positivity rate goes down, which shows that there is a reduction in the county's positivity and spread of COVID-19. Next slide. San Diego is the 2nd largest county in our state. And so looking at San Diego County as a whole is a very large area. So we want to drill down deeper into the local area of Oceanside. So we have 2 data sets for you on this slide. The first one is from December 12th, which is the positivity rate for our local. And at that point, it was 23.6 per 100,000 on a 7-day average. What was reported on the 8th of January, which is the most recent data, we are at 55.6 case rate per 100,000. Again, that is slightly below the previous 7-day case rate of 59, but again, well above the thresholds for being in the red tier. Next slide, please. At our last board meeting, we also wanted to provide context around the type of instructional models that are occurring in our local county. So San Diego County Office of Education produces a school dashboard, which identifies the ways that students are receiving education in our county. They identify students learning full-time on campus, students who are in hybrid, which means some learning is occurring at home and some learning is occurring at school, and then those students who are in 100% distance or virtual learning. On this December 12th, with that data collection, we found that we had about 71% of all students in the county were in distance learning. After our December 12th Board of Education meeting, many other districts did move to distance learning or virtual learning as we did. And currently this data set shows that 75% of all students in the county participate in virtual learning at this time. So you can see in the chart that there's been an increase of over 16,000 students in distance learning between the beginning of December and mid-December. Next slide, please. Something else that we were noticing and monitoring carefully were the attendance trends among students coming to school. And so we do monitor attendance each and every day, both those students who come to a physical classroom, those students who are showing up to a Zoom meeting with their teacher, and those students who participate in producing virtual work for this. And so what we found in October 29th, in virtual learning, while our elementary schools were in virtual learning, as were our middle and high schools, we had an attendance rate of 97.18. In moving towards into November 19th, when we were in hybrid, 94.29% attendance rate. In December, on December 10th, we were at 92.97% attendance rate. And again, this includes our secondary schools. And then when we return to virtual, we see that we're at 95.72 on December 17th for our attendance trends. Next slide, please. As we've been going through the global pandemic, what we've been very careful and thoughtful about continuously is to remain focused on the health and safety of our community, staff, and students, while at the same time working to provide the best quality educational outcomes that we can for our students given the current circumstances. These two ideas continue to guide all of our work. Next slide, please. Throughout this pandemic, the board has asked us to consider all possible ways that we can return to in-person learning. We have ensured that our schools have the PPE, the training, the materials, and staffing needed to have school on site. We have followed the health guidance from the CDPH and local health orders. We have monitored the local data and case rates, both at the county and city levels. We know that our youngest students are at least equipped to participate in virtual learning. And at the board's request, we have researched what it would take to return to full in-person learning for elementary students. In-person learning for secondary students, as Dr. Vitale said, is not allowed at this time based on our local health data. As we work to assess the option of bringing students back to in-person instruction full-time, we had many things to consider. These included both opportunities and challenges. Some of the opportunities were to create smaller cohorts of students while allowing for having 5 days of full in-person learning. We wanted to make sure that we were serving our younger students, addressing their social, emotional, academic needs, which these students may be less equipped to access these through virtual learning than those students who are older. We also wanted to make sure that our teachers were going to be able to maintain the distance of 6 feet from their students for social distancing. And we were also looking at full day instruction for K-3 students as a possibility, considering that they have been identified as those who may be experiencing the most challenges with virtual learning. The challenges when we were looking at the models for bringing students back to in-person learning were that if we were to bring students back, we would have combination classes of 2 grades in 1 class. We also may have to reassign students from their current teachers, perhaps for the second or third time this year. There would also be a possibility of different schedules for siblings who are in different grade levels in their early grades, versus those who are in 4th or 5th grade. We would also be looking at hiring additional staff and the time and amount of time that would take to be able to do that in a 6-week period. Also the training. And of course, when we do bring on additional staff, there are delivery considerations for materials, supplies, and technology that need to be considered. And also students' distance from one another within a classroom in these plans would vary. And then of course, we would want time for work group consultation with our employees and community. Next slide, please. So in order to examine what these proposals might look like, we examined 3 models. These models were put forward by Human Resources to research the feasibility of 3 elementary models for in-person instruction, Model 1, 2, and 3. In Model 1, the students would be in 1st or 2nd grade. Model 2 would focus on students from kindergarten through 3rd grade, and Model 3, which would be for kinder through 5th grade students. All of these models would have a full in-person learning 5 days a week. The details of each of these models we will be going over in the next few slides. Next slide, please. So in Model 1, this would be bringing back our 1st and 2nd grade students. In order to do this, we would need, and to keep class sizes smaller, we would need additional 19 teachers across our district and 19 additional classroom spaces, physical classrooms, so that those teachers would have a place to host class. The preliminary analysis says that all elementary school sites could accommodate this additional teaching staff and would have space to lower the class sizes for these grades. We'll now look at model number 2. In model number 2, we examined bringing back kindergarten through 3rd grades. In this model, we found that, again, all of our elementary sites can accommodate the additional teaching staff with a space for them to teach, a classroom. And this would also lower the class sizes for the grades with some adjustment and a movement of classrooms. Next slide, please. And in model 3, we looked at a full return of kindergarten through 5th grade students. In order for this to be achieved in this model, 61 teachers would need to be hired. And we would also be thinking about the number of teaching stations we need. 11 of our elementary school sites could have enough classrooms to accommodate this, although 5 sites would not be able to have the additional classrooms needed to reduce kindergarten through 5th grade. Next slide, please. With all 3 of these models, in looking at this, we felt that model 2 was a option that would maximize our return to in-person for our youngest students. In model 2, this is the kindergarten through 3rd grade model. And in this model, we wanted to show how this might impact 2 particular schools in our district. On the left, you will see Laurel Elementary School adjusted staffing. They would receive 3 additional teachers. And in that would reduce the possible class sizes between 15 and 18 in each and every classroom. Those 3 teachers, there would be an additional combination of 1st and 2nd grade classroom, and students would be reassigned in those grade levels to those new classrooms. So there could be changes of perhaps the 2nd or 3rd time for this year for students. If we look at North Terrace as another example, at North Terrace, by bringing back our students in kindergarten through 3rd grade, we would have 2 additional combination classrooms, and the possible class sizes would range between 18 and 20, again with reassignment of students and possible movement of teachers into particular classrooms. Next slide, please. As Dr. Vitale said, we have received additional funding from the federal government. Our first round of funding under the CARES Act was set to expire by December, and we focused our expenditures upon infrastructure, training, materials, PPE, and now we have funding that will last into the next school year. The cost to bring back students under the 3 models from March until June are as follows. In Model 1, for bringing back 1st and 2nd graders, it would cost $570,000 for the human resources costs alone. The human resources costs for Model 2, which are grades kindergarten through 3rd grade, are $972,000 for human resources approximately. And in grades K through 5, which would be $1,647,000 for the March through June human resources. At that time, also remember, board, that option 3, we do not have adequate classrooms. In addition to that, the likelihood of us being able to hire 61 teachers in a 6-week span that are high quality and able to provide the quality instruction that we need for our students, we do not believe is likely. Next slide, please. So going back to the slide that we started with, we know that there are considerations and opportunities. Again, the opportunity is bringing back students full day, 5 days a week, being able to serve our youngest students, our opportunity for our students who may, in K through 3rd grade, who may be struggling with accessing virtual learning. But again, we also want to look at the challenges of reassigning of students, combination classrooms, and the fact with Model 2, students would be at different schedules. So 4th and 5th graders would still be on a hybrid 2-day-a-week system. Next slide, please. So as we started thinking about bringing students back, we realized that it was very important that we would think long-term about how we can use the money from the federal government to address potential learning gaps for students in a systematic way that leverages assessment, intervention, training, and materials that we have available. So if you look at this graphic, we are suggesting that in March through June, that we return small cohort groups of English learners, special education, homeless foster youth, early grades, and preschool for intervention with the 36 teachers that we identified funded through federal CARES money. These students would be brought back for in-person learning for intervention, and we would be able to systematically support them. In the summer, these same teachers, along with our own teaching staff who would want to work in the summer, we would have 6 weeks of interventions with 2 to 3 week intervals in writing, phonics, mathematics, and credit recovery. This would be targeted, specific intervention that would address the possible learning gaps that students had experienced with the physical school closure. And then these interventionists would then move into the school year of 2021 and 2022 to provide 2 full-time intervention teachers that would help extend the school day at each and every one of our elementary, 1 interventionist at each of our middle school, so that we could have extended time for our highest need students and really address their needs. And part of that would be our package of assessing their social emotional needs through Panorama, academic assessments in language arts and math so that the interventions are guided by data, using our instructional framework of the 5 dimensions of teaching and learning to make sure that our quality instruction is happening for all of our kids, and of course, credit recovery for our high school students. We want to make sure that we leverage the intervention materials that we were able to purchase with the first round of CARES money. So unlike in the past, sometimes when we've had intervention, we may have had human resources, but we didn't have materials. We have an opportunity to think long-term, to think about really addressing those learning gaps with high quality materials, high quality teaching and learning, and extended time for our at-promise students. So we wanted to let the board know that this is a very exciting opportunity that we have based on the federal funds that are available to us. Thank you. Next slide, Dr. Vitale.
So to synthesize and give a brief synopsis, we've put this into, as we see it, 3 options for the board to consider. The first option, so if you approve the K3 smaller cohort option, we give March 1st as a target date for implementation. That date is solely based on the time frame that we think we need to be able to hire the 36 teachers that we would need to bring those cohorts down to our goal of below 20. So that would be the soonest that we believe we would be able to do that. So that is an option to approve the K3 smaller cohort, which was Model 2, which again, we know we're able to do this now and fund it because that CARES money was extended. Another option is to keep the elementary schools virtual until the county returns to red, and then pivot back to hybrid with a 2-week notification. I want to remind the board that because we did open initially in the red, while we were in the red, even though we're now in the purple tier, we can open up for in-person instruction with elementary at any time of the board's choosing. So I just want to make that clear with this option, but this is an option. So keep elementary schools virtual and use actual data which would be returning the county to the red tier, and then pivot back to hybrid. And along with this, approve the intervention programs for small cohorts in March for at-promise students. So there would be a couple things happening with this option. We would still move forward with hiring those 36 teachers who would still begin on March 1st. The difference with that and option one is that they would be working with in-person small cohorts. And so that would be the one piece. And then we would consider them as summer school teachers, but our teachers would be given first option for that. But more importantly, and a big piece of this is that we would want these teachers to return with us for the 21-22 school year as interventionists. And we would place 2 at every elementary school. And this would be a phenomenal research-based opportunity for us to address learning gaps for an entire year. And we're able to do this because we know that we have CARES funding that has now been extended all the way until September of 2022. So that would give us the full school year of 21-22. So again, this option, we would still begin with small cohorts on March 1st. So whenever the kids return back, they would return back based on the red tier in a hybrid setting. We would initiate the small cohorts March 1st and potentially use those same teachers for our summer school, which we're planning, and use those same teachers for those interventionists next year. Okay, I think I've repeated myself a lot, but I know I just wanted to try and make that clear. And of course, when you ask questions, we can make that even more clear. Or keep the elementary schools virtual for the remainder of the school year 2021, and still approve the intervention programs for small cohorts in March for at-promise students. So those 2 options, the second and the third one, are identical, except for how we bring students back. Either we bring them back in the red tier, or we don't bring them back at all. But the same idea of approving those intervention programs, hiring those 36 teachers to begin on March 1st, potentially help with summer school, keep them on staff for the 21-22 school year to serve as interventionists. So with that, we're certainly ready, willing, and able to take questions. We also have some public comments on this, President Begin. So
let's start with some questions from the board members, and then we'll pivot to public comment, and then we'll come back if we have additional questions based on what we heard during public comment. So I'm looking at my board members. Just give me a visual sign if you have questions. Eleanor has questions. We'll start with Eleanor.
Okay, I just have one question at this point. Is kindergarten going to be a full day kindergarten program?
So Ms. Evans, when we return to in-person instruction, we had for this year planned on a full day. So yes, it would be full day if we chose option 1. For the 21-22 school year, it would be a full day kindergarten when we return to in-person instruction. The intervention will be handled as specific targeted block times throughout the school day and a little bit after school as needed.
Okay, and I kind of have another question. With why, I think it was option 2, why there was no kindergarten. It was first and second graders returning, but not kindergarten.
Yes.
What was the rationale for that?
Yes.
Population of students or what?
Yeah, for option 1, the reason we looked at first and second grade students were because the students who were in second grade right now were first graders last year, so they missed March, and the students who are in first grade have missed March on and their first grade year. And we know these are very critical early learning times. So we felt that with kindergarten traditionally having been half day in a lot of places, that really putting our focus on first and second grade would be important. That combined with when we went 20-1 back in the 90s, the recommendation at that time from research was to start with first grade, to really target first grade, and then you could choose either second grade, third grade, and kindergarten or third grade were both chosen. So we use those as the model. So thank you for that question.
Anyone else
you.
have questions or need clarification?
Yes. Okay. So I didn't see pre-K included on the groupings. Is pre-K included in the proposals that have in the 3 proposals, I guess they are, that were for expanded today?
We did not include pre-K. We are doing an investigation currently around pre-kindergarten about what the requirements are, what kinds of things are being brought forward by the California CDPH. But right now we were focusing on kindergarten and first grade, the early level grade, because of the early literacy. But no, we did not talk about that. But intervention is something we're thinking in the next school year that it would be available in some of our preschool students.
TK, pre-K, all of it. It's starting with kindergarten and up. We're starting with kindergarten with those proposals. Okay. Can you pull up slide 14, Mr. Mayor? And I can get started while we're doing that. So this is the proposal to possibly bring back K-5. And so we would need lots of additional teachers, a lot of additional, 61 teachers, a ton. The biggest problem that we have in this plan is that we don't have enough space. How many physical classrooms will we need to add to sites in order to accommodate this plan?
I'm not aware of how many there would be, but in addition, it's not just the classrooms, but hiring 61 teachers in 6 weeks would, we don't believe that the human resources are available. So we wouldn't want to start off with promising that we would have that many teachers in place and not be able to hire them. 31 teachers in 6 weeks. Remember that people do need to get cleared with fingerprints, and we need to make sure we do the recruitment and the interviewing process. So it was not just the classrooms, but also the number of 61 seemed that it might be more than we could accommodate to meet that need.
So my thinking was more about long-term. So let's say that we wanted to do this and then keep our cohorts small for next year, because we all know that teachers can be more effective the less students that are in the classroom. If we added the necessary classrooms so that each school site could do smaller cohorts, K-5, maybe we split this proposal and did K-3 on our first proposal and got those teachers in as fast as possible. And then as we hired more teachers, we could hold these levels of classes through the end of this year and through next year in order to do the learning loss mitigation. I know that the staffing was about 1.6 million, which is a lot of money, but it's not a lot of money compared to the money that we're getting from the federal government for this. Can you talk about how much we're projected to get with our second round of funding it's on its way this spring?
Let me talk about the first part about the question about this classrooms. Right now, I wouldn't know specifically how many classrooms per school, but we know 5 schools couldn't do it. So I couldn't tell you, but if you just look at these numbers, it could be, 3, 4 on a particular class base. That involves, if it was to, like, say, get a portable, we would have to go through DSA. We would have to ensure that we have um, the sewer systems, the lighting,
Electrical, yeah.
electrical. Yes, thank you. Electrical, not lighting. So
Furniture.
there is quite a bit of lead time to bring an actual physical building onto a campus. So that would be one thing. The other question is around the 1.6 about million dollars is only for 3 months. So that would have to be, if we were expanding that out, we would have to triple that amount again. So it would be quite a bit more expensive, $5-6 million ongoing. The other thing too is a lot of thought has been around the idea of class size reduction and also the idea of targeted interventions. So a lot of the research shows that class sizes were really being targeted with smaller class sizes. If we're going to look at equity, what we want to do is ensure that our at-promise students who may have experienced the largest learning gap would receive the most targeted supports. And so by using an intervention teacher, they would be able to have that very targeted support. If we lower class sizes altogether for the whole year, and it's where the projections are that next year, with the advent of the vaccines, that the health benefits of having smaller class sizes would be less of a thought process, and we're really focusing on the educational background. So being able to have an interventionist who could use the materials that we've had, use the assessments, and really provide support to the classroom teacher by addressing the highest need students, and then the students being able to be in the classroom, we felt would be a better approach than reducing class sizes for educational purposes. Obviously, for health purposes at this time, that is very important.
And Eric, I want to interject. We have Mitch Maynard on the meeting, and Mitch, maybe you can give us, is there anything that you would have added to some of the complexities around adding additional classrooms to the campus? And I think you probably even are aware of costs associated with that. And to answer your question about what we believe that we will be allocated through the next round of CARES money is about $12.6 million. So Mitch, I see that you are down at the harbor. So it looks like a nice sunny day out there. So can you give us some update on that to try and answer Eric's question, add on to what Mercedes said? She did a good job answering, but I think there are some probably other considerations.
Sure. Yes, I'd like to further answer your question, Trustee Joyce. So with portables, as you know, it's a very difficult process. Even if we fast tracked any portables to find the time to get them through DSA, it's usually between a 2 to 3 month process just to fast track it as an emergency item, because we could go under an emergency status. We just did it at SLR, so I'm really familiar with the process. Where we get into a sticky situation is all the infrastructure. So infrastructure is really, really crucial, especially when you have to tie in all the factors: fire, life safety, electrical, plumbing, infrastructure, furniture. As you know, it just compounds the process. Just kind of give you a snapshot of what the cost was just for SLR, and we're not completely done with it. I think we're at a total of about $500,000 for those 3 trailers, and we're not even complete yet. So, and that was fast tracking it through DSA, and we still have some outstanding issues that we're still trying to finish in order to get those trailers usable at this time. So as you can see, the process is just going to be exponential. Ultimately, we could do our very best, and we can try to mitigate as much as we can and consolidate where we can, but it's just a very tedious process.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mercedes, could you give us a full description of what in the proposal says return of small cohorts, EL, SPED, homeless, and foster youth, early grades, including preschool? What, it's really hard for me to consider voting on going forward with that. So I just would really like that fleshed out for the board to get an understanding.
Great. Thank you so much for asking. So at this point, what we would be looking at is each school, school by school, identifying through our, first of all, the demographics of students. So we know which students are English learners. We know which students are homeless and foster youth. We know which students are special education students, right? So we would first look at that grouping. We would assign, at this time, we're thinking, again, we have to flesh this out because we want to make sure that we do have the boards. But what we're imagining is that we would have 2 interventionists at each school, approximately. Some schools, and so in those 2 interventionists, we would look and say we have, let's say, 100 kids. I'm just going to choose a number, right? 100 for ease of this. And the students would go to their class, their virtual classroom or their in-person classroom next year. And then they would be able to be assessed with iReady to find out where they might have some learning gaps. They would be able to look at their LPAC score if they were English learners, and we would of course look at their IEP if they were special education students. And we would then assign them to come and have small group instruction with a fully credentialed teacher using the intervention materials which are tied to our core curriculum. And so that would include early literacy readers, phonics, decoding, comprehension, whatever it was that was targeted for that student's need. And the student would then be able to receive that small group of instruction. At this point, I'm thinking no more than 6 or 8 at one time, and being able to have that several, 2 to 3 times a week. So we'd have to look at the numbers and work it out. But that with 2 full-time people at each school site, we would definitely be able to find a way to bring back many students in the short term and then also address them in the long term.
So when you say return of small cohorts, March to June, you're saying that that's virtually
No,
returned?
in person.
Okay, so they would have to get to campus for appointments that are probably no more than an hour and a half at a time. I know I'm asking specific questions. It just, the impact of this is, you know, it has to be part of the equation too.
Well, we would follow CDPH guidelines and probably keep those cohorts no bigger than 14. Again, because we're always balancing the health and the educational outcomes. So from educational standpoint, to really target an intervention, we want it even smaller, but from health, we wanted it at 14. So we would have to work out the number specifically, and with 16 schools, I couldn't tell you, I didn't work out them all, but I know that we would be able to do it multiple times during the week. But we want to make sure it was equitable and focused on our students who may have experienced the largest learning gaps.
And so just further to bring up complications with this, we're talking about students who are English learners, who are special needs learners, who are homeless and foster, and then possibly looking at students who are pre-K or K through 5. Those are extremely diverse groups of students. The students who are most impacted with special needs, having them learn from a teacher that they're not familiar with, in groupings that I don't even know how we coordinate it. When CDPH has said that we could bring back kids in small cohorts, they do mean that we could bring them back now to even in secondary level to meet with their teacher. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. And we wouldn't, and just to be clear, we would not be thinking about bringing back such a diverse group in the same group of 14. Currently, Dr. Lawrence and Mrs. Grablin are working with the principals on the data to examine which students may be having the biggest impact. So we would use data basically to make sure that we really are identifying those students and making sure that it aligns with their needs. So again, we really want to be systematic and targeted. That's really the key to this. And again, that would look different at each of our school sites, just like in the presentation, when we talk about bringing them back all at once, some schools would experience many combination classrooms. And that's another thing. If we brought back all K through 5, I believe the number of 61 would result in more combination classrooms than what you saw in the 2 examples.
Okay. So we're still doing questions. Okay. pull up my other document.
Well, if you want to take a break just for a second, we'll see if
Yeah.
other board members have questions, but we will circle back. We're by no means done with this conversation or questions. So Raquel, Eleanor, Mike, do you have any questions for Mercedes?
No, not at this time. When we circle back, I would. But I think
Stacy,
we
Um,
need a break.
You need a break right now?
Stacy, we do have public comment on this item.
Yes, I do know. I'm just waiting to see if any other board members, Raquel, have any questions before we go into public comment. None? Okay, let's go into public comment and then we'll come back to more discussion. So how many public comments do we have out there?
For this item, we have 7.
Super. All right. So Anne, I'll turn it over to you to call them up.
Okay,
Remember
I'm-
that you have 3 minutes and we really want to adhere to the time frame on this.
Okay. So the first 3 are Elaine Kiswick, Sarive Orango, and Amy Palmer. Elaine, you will go first.
Hello, board members. My name is Elaine Keswick. I've spoken before regarding my daughter Coral, who attends a special education preschool class in the district. I would like to share some research I did regarding surrounding districts and the amount of time they have provided in-person instruction to their SPED preschool students. Just as a benchmark, 4 days a week, 3 hours per day is considered full-time. Oceanside, 2 days a week, 2 hours per day. Fallbrook, 4 days a week, 3 hours per day, full-time. Bonsall, 4 days a week, 3 hours per day, full-time. San Marcos, 4 days a week, 2.5 hours per day, very close to full-time. Vista, for the most impacted students, 4 days a week, 3 hours per day, full-time. Carlsbad, 4 days a week, 3 hours per day, full-time. Encinitas, 4 days a week, 3 hours per day, full-time. Solana Beach, 4 days a week, 4 hours per day, full-time. Del Mar, 4 days a week, 3 hours per day, full-time. COVID is a common denominator. It is present in all of these cities. So my question is, how and why did every other district besides OUSD make it a priority to safely and successfully bring their SPED preschool students back for full-time? These other districts know that distance learning is not appropriate for students like Coral. Offering distance learning to kids like Coral is equivalent to giving them no education for 10 months. And giving kids like Coral no education, except for the 17 hours of in-person instruction she has personally received to date, puts the district out of compliance with students' entitlement to a free, appropriate public education. OUSD, you are out of compliance. I want to clarify that this has nothing to do with her teacher or the principal at her school. They both work very hard. The thing is that, unfortunately, it doesn't matter how hard her teacher works to prepare her Zoom sessions. You can't put a nonverbal 4-year-old child with extremely limited receptive language who needs face-to-face interaction to communicate in even the most subtle ways, and who also has a significant intellectual disability in front of a screen and expect learning to happen. It will not. Presently, our preschool students should be able to continue at minimum their 2 days per week and 2 hours per day at school with transportation. While this is happening, a plan needs to be immediately put into place by the district, as every other aforementioned district has already done, to bring our students back to 4 days per week and to increase the time per day to 3 hours as soon as possible. Make our kids a priority. This is about equity in education and not equality. This is precious developmental time, the first 5 years. It is time that will never be returned to Coral or any of her peers. Coral may have many challenges to overcome, but she has far more gifts. Being in school full-time is a critical part of her becoming the best Coral she can be, and thus being able to share her gifts with the world. So far, OUSD and this board have failed our students. Look at the other districts. Look what they have done. Please do not continue to fail them. This is far, far too important. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Elaine. Our next public speaker.
Sarive.
Hi, hello. My name is Sarive. I have a 4-year-old son that attends a special education preschool class at North Terrace. I also have a neurotypical 7-year-old that attends second grade at Nichols. And right now, I'm very concerned with my son specifically. He receives instruction twice a week for 2 hours. He has several needs when it comes to behavior, attention, expressive and receptive language, and fine motor skills. He currently has 10 different goals on his IEP, and I'm just concerned that with the amount of hours he's receiving now, it's just not enough time for the team and his teachers to really help him. And as a parent, I don't have the skills that a occupational therapist or speech therapist or a registered behavior therapist have. So I just wanted to see if it's at all possible that they get more hours for school, specifically for special education students with IEPs. And that's it. That's all I wanted to comment.
Thank you, Sarive. Our next public speaker.
Amy Palmer.
Members of the board, your lack of forward thinking has been frustrating from the beginning of the school year in 2020. Here's a few new issues that I'm sure you probably haven't even started thinking about yet. First, now that the 2 vaccines are out, why have we not heard any information about your plans for the staff to receive it and what that means for the move to in-person learning? According to covid19.ca.gov, teachers are in the 1B phase for the vaccine. So how do you plan to start that process once they work through the healthcare workers? What will your plan be once the teachers and staff have begun the vaccination process? Will the teachers have the opportunity to opt out, and will parents be notified if their child's teacher does, so they have the option to change classrooms? Will our students be shuffled around based on a survey of wanting to stay virtual versus attending in person? So those wanting virtual can move to teachers who do not want to get the vaccine, and those wanting in person can be put with a teacher who has received the vaccine. Second, why have the standards for substitute teachers not changed since we're in such dire need of more staff? You would think the smart thing to do would to be raise pay as an enticement, relax certain requirements, and advertise the link to apply everywhere instead of saying nothing and hiding all information on how to help out. The last board meeting was the first I have ever heard of us not having enough staff to return to in-person schooling. I've been on the district web page almost daily, trying to glean even a tiny crumb of information out of you, and I've seen nothing about staff shortages. That should be the first thing you're putting up there. There are plenty of people still looking for jobs with unemployment in California at 6.6% and 105,000 unemployed in San Diego County alone. That doesn't even take into account the transient military spouses who fluctuate every month with various degrees and certifications. Third, I would also like to point out again how much safer our children are in school instead of at home. When we're doing virtual learning, babysitters are running through multiple houses to cover parents who work or who have appointments for themselves or other family members because you can't bring anyone else with you. Children are playing together at parks without masks. Stay-at-home parents are taking their children to the store, hiking on popular trails, going to the beach, all of which where no one is wearing their mask because it's outside, and people seem to think that being outside negates the need for a mask. In-person school, children are wearing their masks all day. They are social distancing. They're using hand sanitizer, washing their hands frequently, and the cleaning of classrooms occurs on a regular basis. Fourth, I would like to ask how teachers are being held accountable for their classrooms. I can tell you my personal experience has been negligent. I do not understand how my child's needs are being met when there's no accountability for the work being done or evaluated by her teacher. None. No work goes to school, no work is submitted on Seesaw, one virtual assessment has been completed the entire school year. So how can you use data to target the most at-risk students if there is no accountability? I also want to point out that I looked at the data charts and slides you presented, and they do not match what I am currently seeing on the websites that you have used for the triggers used for the modifying of the health order. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Amy.
Our next set of speakers will be Richard Engel, Victoria Tyre, Eric Engel, and Ambrosio Solis. Richard Engel, you will go first.
Mr. Engel, you're on a phone. You'll need to unmute so you can proceed.
Let's go to Victoria.
Hello, I'm Victoria Tyre, and I was a teacher for 4 years. In my experience, young children, especially those with special needs, require much repetition and reinforcement for school success. With preschoolers, instruction of skills and behaviors does not easily lend itself to the computer or tablet. They need in-person, one-on-one instruction, and as much of that as possible. I'm requesting that preschool special education be extended from 2 days a week to 4 days a week, and at least 3 hours a day. I think that this is a better solution and will meet the needs of these young students and my darling preschool niece. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria.
Eric Engel.
Hi, yes, my name is Eric Engel. I have a niece as well in your district, and I'm very concerned and echoing the sentiments that have been stated in that this is unacceptable for children. We're talking about kids that are 3 or 4 years old. That is a year of no proper instruction is 25% of a 4-year-old's life. And you imagine restricting, in other areas that education, that opportunity. I have a 3-year-old son, who's probably here. Mommy has to take care of him. He was out of preschool for 3 months where we live, and it was very tough. It was hard to not see just the social learning and growth. And he is considered, quote unquote, a typical, quote, normal, whatever that means, doesn't have the special needs that a lot of students do. And even in that case, you can see the growth that was being inhibited. And luckily he was able to go back and only missed about 2 or 3 months of this, interaction and education with his peers. And I can't imagine having him not be able to get that for, we're talking about almost a year. So I really urge you to consider this. Everything in life has a risk. I think if you look at the data, the research, there's zero data pointing at this being a very dangerous thing to do. And there's a lot of evidence pointing towards it being a compassionate and smart, intelligent thing to do for our children and special needs kids and all children in that aspect. And I'll yield the rest of my time, and I thank you for your time, and I hope you take this into consideration. Thanks.
Thank you, Eric.
Ambrosia Solis.
Hello, good evening. My name is Ambrosia Solis. I am actually a teacher in Vista Unified School District, but I'm a recent new homeowner, so yay, in Oceanside, and I am a member of Board District 5, so I believe, congrats to Mike Blessing, I believe is my representative. This is my first meeting where I join for public comment, and I just want to say thank you to all the hard work you all are leading at this time. It's a really tough seat to be in. And I'm familiar with that position because prior to becoming a teacher, I worked in public education in various positions for about 10 years, including working for one of the board members for Los Angeles Unified School District. So I deeply relate to the struggles of balancing the decisions in your hands. As a community member, I wanted to express that I would encourage you all to please consider keeping schools closed for in-person learning and to prevent the spread of the COVID surge currently going on. As a community member with health issues and family members who live in this area as well, I'm deeply concerned about the rise of case rates, and not just Oceanside, but neighboring districts. And I'm even more deeply troubled knowing that the new mutation has been of the COVID strain has been found in San Diego County, which currently is being stated that it is more contagious and also, unfortunately, is harmful to children. And as much as I want to be in a classroom with my students in Vista, I know there are many staff members in Oceanside who feel the same way. As a community member, I'm encouraging and in support of keeping limited in-person classroom. But I do support the use of small cohorts so that students can receive the support that they can in what's capable in the name of safety. So with that, I just wanted to end with, I understand that we need a lot of grace and support amongst each other in our community. And I want to personally thank Eric Joyce. I saw you post the announcement for this meeting on some social media outlets, and I think that kind of communication is really helpful. And I look forward to being a partner in this community, and I look forward to enrolling my future kids in this district. So thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you, Ambrosia.
And one more time, Richard Engel. That's all, Madam President, that we have for
Hello?
this.
Hello?
Oh, there he is. Great. Is this Eric?
Oh, yeah, sorry. No, this is Richard Engel.
Oh, Richard. Okay.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen of the Oceanside School Board. I'm speaking today out of concern for our special needs granddaughter. She's a preschooler. Before the COVID pandemic, our granddaughter was receiving 3 hours per day of in-person instruction, 4 days a week, 12 hours total per week. We saw real improvement in our granddaughter as a result of her time in school. As we all know, the COVID pandemic changed everything. This was understandable in the beginning. However, now the medical experts know much more, and they have been recommending for some time that young children should be receiving a lot more in-person instruction. Specifically, Governor Newsom stated that in-person instruction should be rolled out for special needs children. All of Oceanside surrounding cities seem to have taken the governor's recommendation to heart. As I understand it, most surrounding districts, if not all, have had standard in-person special needs classes since September with no significant COVID problems. Recently, we have become aware that our granddaughter will only be receiving 45 minutes of in-person instruction 2 days per week. That's 1.5 hours per week, down from 12 hours per week pre-COVID. This seems much, much too little school time for special needs kids to progress and move forward as online instruction falls flat for them. Allow me to do the math. The current regimen you have put in place reflects a pre-COVID weekly shortfall of 10.5 hours per week, amounting to 42 hours every 4 weeks. By the end of term in June, that will total approximately 210 lost hours on top of the already lost hours at 12 hours per week from September, October 2019 until now, probably over 150 hours. You have to admit that this is unacceptable for special needs kids. They are the very ones that need the most help. In addition, without busing, these 2 short sessions make it very difficult, if not impossible, for parents to manage getting their children to and from school, especially if they have other young school-age children at home doing online classes. So I'm asking for the welfare of all special needs kids that the board reconsider these short sessions and return to the full complement of pre-COVID weekly instruction right away. That is 12 hours of school per week per child with busing. If the board insists on keeping the current regimen, I think it is only fair, in the spirit of transparency, to send a letter to all of the parents of special needs children in the district within 30 days. This letter needs to state why the Oceanside School District insists on providing such limited service for special needs kids and why Oceanside service levels differ so dramatically from all of the surrounding districts. Thank you for listening. And again, we hope that you act promptly for the benefit of all special needs children in Oceanside. Thanks again.
Thank you, Richard. Was that our last public comment?
Yes, on this item.
All right, so let's continue our board discussion and any questions. We had some valid comments made. I'll start then while you guys are thinking. So we heard some valid concerns from special education parents. Mercedes, would you like to elaborate on how special education needs will be addressed for these students with those options?
As we talked about with our interventionist, we'll be bringing back the small cohorts. And so one of the things that we're thinking about is preschool is under a slightly different umbrella than kindergarten through 12th grade. In some areas, you've seen preschools that are privately run. They are under different California CDPH guidelines than preschools which are under a local educational agency. And so we have some different requirements for health. One of the things that I will be working with is we do have 2 coordinators who we've been looking into across all districts. Some of the districts that were mentioned have some differing funding levels and funding models. But for us, what we're thinking about is how can we bring back targeted intervention also for preschool, but because of the funding mechanisms and because of the state requirements, we'd like to bring that back to a work group and as a separate item next month to show how we can do the interventions for preschools in much the same way we're talking about it for kindergarten.
Thanks. Thank you. Any more questions for Dr. Levy?
Just to review, how many days and how many hours would the cohorts be? Can you explain that at this time?
Ms. Evans, I would have to do the math on that and let you know what that would look like. Again, figuring out the number of teachers we have and the number of students. So I couldn't tell you, it may differ depending on the students' needs. So I would have to, but I can bring that back.
And it would also depend upon if parents wanted their students doing in-person instruction on the school site. So that could potentially be another limitation. So we'll deal with those on a very individual basis. So that's just another component of that figuring.
And also, perhaps we should share that to be hired by the school district, that the state has certain requirements that we cannot circumvent or overstep.
That's great.
So can I ask, did we get the recommendation from any public health experts, statewide or countywide, that recommend that it's not safe to return for in-person instruction in either cohort or in person until the red tier?
No, the CDPH guidelines really are that if you opened while you were in the red tier, regardless of what tier we're in now, we can reopen. The restrictions are that if you didn't open while you were in the red tier, you can't open. So we don't understand what that's based on other than that is the CDPH guideline. So you absolutely can open up back for hybrid instruction. I don't want to say legally because it doesn't seem like these things are legal, but per the CDPH guidelines.
And we made that by 1 day, right? We opened on Monday and those guidelines came out on Tuesday, right?
I want to clarify. We did make that by 1 day, but all elementary schools were eligible for a waiver from before that time to open, because it's recommended that elementary schools be open.
There were waivers available, Mr. Joyce. We did monitor that closely, and the requirements, much like the governor's proposal, were very stringent. And actually, the only waivers that were granted were typically among private schools with very large funding bases and a very small population. So if you go back to slide 7, where we talk about SDCOE, who is in-person learning and who is not. Many of those schools that have the full in-person were those that received the waiver. And you can see that even among those, most of those are either charter or private schools, and they have had a reduction over the past month of who's in-person. So yes, waivers have been available. And then once we got into purple level, I couldn't tell you the exact date, but our health officer, Dr. Wooten, said, do not even bring forward the waivers. We will not consider any of them.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. So we are cleared to be open right now. We do have data. So to be clear right out front, I don't think we should be increasing in-person instruction right now with the case rates as they are.
And could I just ask you, so, and that's just because of the case rates and then we're in the purple tier, is that I want to understand that because you're saying.
Yeah, well, it's not, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I just want that understood because I wanted to just make sure I understand our framework, because I was very concerned about us being in the purple tier, and the 1-day issue to me going in the red is a finesse issue, and I don't still fully understand why one would open back up in a purple tier, even if they were allowed to, because we're in a red tier, but because we were open. But be that as it may, I just want to say I'm very concerned about it opening under a purple tier scenario under the current conditions like today. And I guess that's what you were starting to say too. So I agree with that piece, if that's what you're going to say. But
so I am, but it is nuanced. So the purple tier is a range, right? It's anything above seven cases per 100,000. We are at, I think it's 63. That was from yesterday. It actually went up today. So your data had 50 something, and then I checked while we were on our presentation, it's at 60 something now as of today.
Yeah, there's actually two different numbers right now from yesterday. They used to do it on a systematic every Tuesday. Now they can change it whenever. But yesterday when I pulled the data, it was 53.4 adjusted rate per 100,000 for our county. And for our local school, local area, Oceanside, we're at 55.6 adjusted. The adjusted just means the number of tests we take, and there's some other calculations. So sometimes those numbers are slightly off.
That's not just purple, that's deep purple. If 7% is the range, that's, wow.
Yep. And so my thinking on this is nuanced. So it's not that purple means we should be closed. From my understanding, we have good public health data that being open in the purple per se is not particularly unsafe, that if we use all the precautions, we can control and even prevent spread on campus with an extreme high likelihood. My worry right now is that if we bring kids back with it so widespread that it will overwhelm those masking, distancing, all the things that we have in place are good up to a point of spread. We don't have a lot of good data about areas that have really widespread. And in fact, the only data that I have seen about areas that were really widespread show that it actually might have community spread increasing around school districts that are open when it's really high spread, which means high case rates like we are now. However, if our case rate as a county, and I like to go by county because we have staff members and even students that are living between two different households in two different districts. That's why I like to use the county numbers, and our numbers actually reflect the county numbers pretty well throughout the whole pandemic. We fluctuated a little bit higher or a little bit lower depending on the week, but we're pretty in line with the county's trajectories. So I like to use the county numbers because it reflects the population that's actually on our campus sites. My thinking on when we should target reopening for either hybrid or the K3 cohort option would be that we look at a case rate of 28, which is the proposal from the CDPH and governors. This is really unfortunate timing because we're supposed to get new guidance this week, in fact, which would give us more information on this decision. For one, I think this decision is complicated and has a couple different things going on, the small cohorts being one of them. I don't I don't think that's nearly enough instruction. And especially for our students with special needs who, as stated by many of our call-ins, have had permission, and even the superintendent of the county and the state has said, get those students back in person when it's safe. And so I think they need more. I think we need to be looking at more instruction for them from their teachers and case providers that know them well. And I would really like to see a workshop on that within the next couple of weeks, a plan, some options that have details on what we can do to get those students back in as soon as possible.
You're talking about special education, elementary?
Yeah, so actually I wrote it out because I knew it's really nuanced, right? So I am talking about elementary. None of these plans actually have students with special needs back in their schools, which they could be back in. If you pick something random, it could be half days with their teachers on small cohorts, which wouldn't even be considered open. It's a level under being considered open. We could bring them back for the vulnerable populations with cohort instruction no more than 14:1. Students with special needs have been permitted to return to school sites since September, and the state and county have recognized the essential nature of the in-person instruction for these students. They are more vulnerable to the effects of isolation. They do not lose what they're missing out on in an equitable manner. Students that have significant behavioral, social, emotional needs blended with special needs in learning, it could take many, many years to recover what they have lost. And it's not just in the realm of learning their ABCs. It's much more complicated than that. And I think that the guidance all reflects an impetus to act for these students specifically. So the groups to consider would be the pre-K SPED classes, students in mod severe classes, that'd be behavioral and learning-based mod severe classes, students experiencing homelessness in foster, students with significant behavioral challenges, and that's not necessarily students that are in a self-contained class, students with acute or persistent emotional health challenges. So those are all students that the math that we do on whether or not they're in school is just more complex. And if we have guidance that says get our teachers working with these students in small cohorts, if we got to do it outside with tents, I mean, we are taking in a lot of money this spring, and part of that is based on the LCFF, which takes into account students who are low SES, students who are unduplicated, students who are English learners. It takes into all that into account because we're supposed to be spending more on meeting their needs. So at the long end of that diatribe, I don't feel prepared to make a decision on cohorts and special education and their return based on the information that I have today.
Well, I'm not prepared to make. I mean, I'm struggling with what decisions we really have in front of us today that we can act on, that we even have consensus on, if we can get some. From staff standpoint, are you? I mean, the special ed issues that we heard from the public tonight was focused on they're only getting an hour a day instead of 4 hours a day, 5 days a week. We need to set that aside and deal with that and bring that back as a separate issue or something, discuss it as a issue. What staff's trying to ask us to do is to come up with a new approach here starting March 1st. And I'm thinking that whatever we give direction to staff to today, they have to go negotiate with the teachers union and the CSEA. So we can give some direction to Julie today to do X, Y, and Z, plan model 1, model 2, model 3, or one that you've come up with, Eric, but it's all going to go to the teachers.
So can we pull up that final screen, the elementary options for consideration, so we can all take a look at it again and ask some questions? Mike, while you were talking, you can keep going. Sorry, I just want them to have.
Yeah, no. I was through. I was just saying, I just want to make the point that any one of these three we pick, or a variant that we come up with off the back of a napkin tonight, Julie's going to have to go and talk with CSEA and OTA about coming back to work.
So we need to hire people is what I'm hearing. And we need to get out in front of that. We need to hire highly effective, qualified teachers, regardless of whatever option we choose. And they need to get on that sooner rather than later, because it's not just the hiring of the teachers, it's also the training of these teachers on our programs and the interventions, et cetera. So I think that's why there's a timely piece to this as well, I believe.
No, okay, I get that. And that came through from staff that basically they want to go forward and hire 31 teachers now that will be used for the next year, all things considered, through implementation or special projects or something. That's today where they're going to wrap their hands around at least bringing on 31, and we have a way to fund them, and they'll be useful for us in some way, for sure. And so I understand that decision being important today. So I'm comfortable with that one.
Go ahead, Eric.
No, well, I was going to say we could also amend the first one to do K3. I would like to add the stipulation that we are under 28 per 100,000 as our case rate as a county.
I'm not ready to go there yet. I'm not sure when we're opening yet, Eric. I mean, I'm not sure what number I think I may get there. I might get at 28. Sounds like the state wants to be there and wants to maybe even force us to be there. But I don't want to pre-make that decision tonight on that number. Because because purple is purple. And again, I'm not sure we can force our teachers back in at 28 without negotiation, right? If that's something you want Julie to talk with and get some sense from in negotiations, that's within her purview to get a sense of the teachers about that. But I don't think we should lock that number out there right now, personally.
Yeah. And I have a few concerns about that first option anyways.
Yeah, I do too. And the second
that first option, yes, I want to see the kids back. Yes, I do. I don't know if March 1st will be out of the purple tier. So if we're at a stay-at-home order, I'm not comfortable with coming back March 1st. We do need to have intervention programs for our students by March 1st. We need to have that. So it's a very fine line right now, but I don't see that working, because when you make those smaller class sizes, you're hiring teachers, every school site. They gave us 2 grids on North Terrace and Laurel. You're gonna have combo classes. Kids are gonna be moved from their current teacher that they have had all year through this pandemic, again, into possibly a different teacher. So now you've got some inconsistency this last 3 months. I don't want to see kids moved around. So, the first option for me, I think March 1st, we will not be out of the purple tier. So bringing all those kids back 5 days a week, normal schedule. Anyways, I think it's going to add to the community spread.
So I have a question, Stacy. Is it the purple tier or the stay-at-home order? Because the stay-at-home order will be lifted before we get out of the purple tier. I just want to ask if those are different things.
Well, I liked how you used the case rate number, and I have a feeling that that's going to be changing as we get guidance, just like everything else. But for me, the purple tier is the issue. And in Oceanside, the spread. So I'm sure, like other board members, and we've all been affected by individuals that have had COVID. We've all been tested several times. We've all had that scare. I'm speaking personally. Anyways, I'm not comfortable with bringing them back. Also, what we're not taking in consideration is not just the students. There's a fine line between safety and, they said, learning, educational opportunities. We have our employees to think about as well. It's, exposing them. And we all know, working with younger students, they have a hard time with the 3-foot distancing between each other, wearing their masks, staying 6 feet from the teacher. I mean, all of these complications, they're kids. So I don't think they can adhere to all those. What I haven't heard in that first option is, what is the distancing between the students expected in those small cohorts.
Stacy, we did put that on, it actually appeared twice, and it was on the consideration slide, slide 17. So we want to be clear that the distance between students from one another is variable depending on the class. We can't say that it's 6 feet. We can say that the teacher can be 6 feet away from the students at all times, and that is the CDPH guidelines. And with students, the terminology is as practicable. So students would be social distance as practicable. So it would vary in every classroom depending on how many students are in the classroom. Slide 17 is the slide that actually has that on there, Greg.
And I'm just going to point out that we had a neighboring district do the as practicable, and we saw how that went down. So, and that's really scary. And as a parent and other parents out there, I don't know if I'd be comfortable sending my kid back knowing that they're not going to have that distancing. And then they're coming back home to me to spread it. So like that part, I think we really need to pay attention to the purple tier. I haven't heard from Raquel. Raquel, are we?
Okay, for me, and the biggest thing right now is the purple tier, because we're not even just like purple, we're black, I think, you know, because we're so far over the edge there. Personally, because of being affected by it, the COVID, just within our community itself, and looking as a whole as our community and families within our community, I can't open right now. I can't. And your keyword, Eric, was when it is safe. And we're not safe. It's not safe. I'm looking at our families. I'm looking at our community, because being out and talking to people within our community and just calling people, just making sure they're okay and what their needs are, or anything like that. Families in our community, because of who we are within our community, have come together and gone into from two houses or 3 houses to 1 house, you know, and 1 dwelling. And so now we're not talking just 1 school affected or 2 schools because of elementary or junior high, but multiple schools. So, or multiple elementary schools, because they've got 1 at Laurel, they've got, you know, 1 at Del Rio, or 1 at Ivy or wherever. So that is a huge concern for me, because we're not only now affecting our students, but we're affecting our families and our staff, and we're putting everybody in a harm's way unnecessarily when we don't need to. This spreads obviously very easily, this new one, and we don't have a whole lot, and I get that we don't have a whole lot of information just yet on all these new strains, but the fact that there's other strains, there's the fact that that our numbers are where they're at, I can't do this. And my heart, in all honesty, my heart would be to stay virtual for the end of the school year. That's my heart. But the needs of our students is greater. That the need of our of what our kids have is a priority. So opening up in a red stage works for me, because we still need to serve our students, and we need to give them the services that they need, that they're lacking, that they're not getting currently. And what they need to get and have is more important than just saying completely, let's just stay virtual, because it doesn't work. It doesn't work for anybody at this point within our district. As much as I would in my heart say that that's the best thing to do, our students need to be, our cohorts, or smaller cohorts need to be and get the services that they need. That's where I'm at right now with this. So I know that agreeing with Mr. Blessing and saying that we can't do, I'm not good. I can't honestly in my heart just say, let's just do what we need to do, and let's just open up and let's get these smaller cohorts and let's do, but we do, like Stacey said, we have to get these teachers hired, trained, because our students need that. They need that now sooner than later. And we need to get everybody on that same page of getting that process and getting the word out there, because it's going to be a process. it's going to be a process to hire just 36 people. And so we have to get them and get the process going. And right now this is where I'm at right now. There's a lot of questions. There's a lot of dynamics that go into all of this. So to just, it's hard, like Mike said, to just go through and just make a decision tonight with just some of the information that we have. But right now, based upon the information that I have in front of me, this is where my heart is. And the decision of where I'm at is that this is probably the best thing right now for our students, because I'm going to look at what's important for our students and for our staff and our community as a whole. So I have to look at the whole picture, and even just for myself as for my kid to say, okay, he needs to be back. Like, I so agree. My kid needs to be back in the classroom because it's just where he thrives. Like, he's that social bug, and his livelihood is just, it's hurting of just like who he is, because it's just, he needs to be there. So the enrichment program has been our saving grace. And I thank everybody that's in that that is working and serving in those enrichment programs, because those students that are in there currently are getting some of the services that they need, and some of the love and attention that they need too. So for all those parents out there, that if you don't know that we have enrichment programs within our district, we do, and they're working. So there are things out there, and there are services within our district and that we do have, that it seems like a lot of people, for whatever reason, don't know that we have. And but this is where I'm kind of just at, and sorry.
Thanks for sharing, Raquel. I agree too that for me, the second bullet, the second option is where I'm at right now. I would love to see us add on to that regarding special education, bringing back our preschool special education into small cohorts, and start with that direction, start seeing what that could look like as well. So I'd like to see that in that second bullet as well. The other question I had for you, Dr. Levy, when you shared the instructional opportunities on the second to last slide, the summer 2021, those 36 teachers were hiring, the 6 weeks of intervention, would that just be for elementary age students? Or would that also be for middle or high school?
We would use the teachers that we're hiring right now, or thinking about hiring right now, are elementary.
Okay.
We were looking at a credit recovery for our high school, using some additional and different funds, and at middle school some other targeted interventions for credits. So that's what we're looking at. So really, it's a 3 phases based on the credentialing, based on the needs, and based on the goals.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have any questions or thoughts on these 3 options? Because we're going to have to take a vote.
I would like us to separate the 2 options. I would like us to separate the small cohort from the first recommendation. It is 2 very separate recommendations. So if we're going to vote on the return to in-person, and if it's going to be whatever option, the return to in-person, I would appreciate if we could separate those 2, because they are very different. I know that any of them require us to hire 36 new teachers. So I think we could consider that passed, and then talk about the other piece of it. So could we separate those 2 for conversational and for voting purposes?
So for clarification, Eric, the 3 options, so if you separate when we open against the intervention piece, so the 3 options would be approved K-3 smaller cohort option for March through June, model 2, use March 1st as the target date, or keep elementary schools virtual until county returns to red tier, and then pivot back to hybrid with a 2-week notification, or keep elementary schools virtual for the remainder of the school year. Am I hearing you correctly?
Right, that would be the first
vote
thing that we vote on.
And then you want to do the sort of intervention piece separately.
Yeah.
Which one includes the 36 teachers?
Yeah,
the first one would, and technically we don't need a vote. The board absolutely needs to act on the return date, Stacy. The intervention piece, you can give direction on. There doesn't need to be a vote, or staff can work on that and flesh that out more, because that doesn't have to be a board vote. If you want it to be, it certainly can be. You can certainly discuss it more. You can certainly give it direction. But we can move forward on that without a board vote. Does that make sense?
And what is staff's recommendation at this moment? In terms of those three bullets?
The second bullet.
The second bullet, keep elementary schools virtual until county returns to red tier and then pivot back to hybrid with 2-week notification. That's staff's recommendation?
That's correct.
I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move that.
Okay, do I have a second? I'll second it.
Any further discussion?
Yes. So per our protocols, we talk about explaining when we're going to do a no vote. So I'm going to go ahead and explain my no vote before we vote. I'm voting no because we do not currently have evidence that we would need to wait for the case rates to return to 7 before returning safely to in-person instruction for elementary school age children. We don't have any evidence that we had transmissions on our campus or that the case rates were impacted locally by elementary schools being open during our time that we were open. And so I do not think that the science supports a restrictive wait until the red tier. And I don't think that strikes the right balance.
Understood. Yeah, thank you for explaining, Jared.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. All right, I'm going to call for the vote. All in favor of approving option 2? Say aye.
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 Aye. All not in favor?
Myself.
Eric? And any abstentions?
For me, this is really hard because I've seen some of the suffering with COVID, and to say that, and I've seen it in children. And by the same time, we really need to have our scholars back in school. I know students are very resilient. They can accommodate and really learn. All right. Because I'm looking at approved intervention programs for small cohorts in March, I am going to vote yes for number 2.
All right, so we have 4 yes votes and 1 no vote. Motion carries. Elementary schools will be virtual until county returns to red tier, and then we'll pivot back to hybrid. Am I correct with that, Dr. Vitale? Because now we need to have the conversation about interventions and hiring those teachers.
Yes, that's correct. That's what you approved. You moved and approved that we would remain virtual until the county turns to the red tier, and then we would pivot back to hybrid. And again, we can continue the conversation around intervention, or we can move forward with that. That doesn't necessarily need board approval, but we're having a pretty good conversation about this, so it's completely up to you.
I would like to move forward with the hiring of those teachers.
I second that motion.
So that's going to happen either way, right? So we've approved that with the original motion. Or I mean, can we approve hiring them, and then what I would like more than anything would be to be back in 2 weeks with a plan for our special education students K-12, because again we have had permission to bring them back with their teachers since September, and in small cohorts. I'm not talking about reopened with lots of kids. We could bring them back 5 at a time. I mean, we could do this in a truly COVID safe way. And I'm not sure that that needs to happen right this second with the case rates at 60, but it certainly should happen before we get back to the red tier, which we didn't even really talk about. That could very well be the summertime.
Yes, could be.
We don't know. And we also we didn't include this in
Or
our
not.
conversation either, but it was brought up that vaccines are absolutely coming, and everything that we hear from the county is that February is the month for the first round. The second round has to come within a month, depending on the vaccination. So we could very well have all staff members who choose to vaccinated by the end of February, which again is another risk reducing thing. But we voted to wait till the red anyway. So I just want to bring up that I think we need to have a robust special education conversation around the guidance, around the guidelines, around what we can do. So I would like to have a workshop 2 weeks from now to do that.
I don't know if we necessarily need a workshop, but I think the clear direction from us to the staff is that we want to see special education addressed, preschool special education and special education, their time with the interventions. So I remember we give direction and they get into how it's going to get done. We don't get into those weeds. I just want to give them the direction that they can go forward and spend their time and energy and resources on strengthening our special education program during the pandemic.
I agree with that. I agree with that 100%. I just like to go back to the 36 teachers. Did we include that in the motion we just did, Julie? Or do you need a separate motion?
No, the only decision you made was about reopening. And what I'll say is with that direction, what we would do is we would reconvene our work groups around special education. And Dr. Lovey and her team would lead that work. The 36 teachers, again, doesn't need board approval. We can move forward with that plan and get those people onboarded and ready and working for us by March 1st. Again, with the idea that they could potentially continue through summer, but absolutely stay with us through next year. So we have them as interventionists, which is a key piece to this plan. So again, that piece doesn't need board approval. We can bring back and share the outcropping of that work group and give Mercedes and her team more time to really pencil through the details of this plan and share that at the next board meeting. That would absolutely give us the time that we need to do that, to convene those work groups.
Great.
Correct, Mercedes? Do you agree with my timeline?
Yes, I think with the next board meeting, with the impact on teachers' time to bring them together in the work group, that would give us time to be able to do that, which would give us 4 weeks. So we want to be able to give the detail that we could, the best detail we could to the board.
Now we're staying with the same work groups that we originally had, or are we going to have to go with different work groups and put them all together?
No, they've been great, right, Mercedes? We'll just reconvene the original work groups. These are people that have been willing from day one to work on this on their own time. So I think that we have a good, solid group for those areas. Correct, Mercedes?
Yeah, we have a great group, and under the leadership of our senior director, Mrs. Gravlin, and our director, Dr. Lawrence, all of us together have been working together collaboratively. I think the hiring of the 36 teachers also gives us an opportunity to bring back the students in those small cohorts. So how we can think about how we would deploy them, and if the priority is around our preschool special education students, we could deploy them in that way too. Much like Mr. Joyce had asked about, like, well, which students and how long and how much. Doing the mathematics on that, we can do that and bring back over a more detailed plan. Again, wanting to have the board's direction before we did do all that penciling out. We wanted to make sure we had that.
Well, I think you got it clear that all of us want you to hire the 36 teachers and bring us back the plan to get the intervention moving forward with the special ed as quickly as possible and as deep as possible, or as robust, I guess is the word for Eric.
Yeah.
Myself.
Sorry, go ahead, Eleanor.
I was just going to say special ed is important, but we also need to look at our quote unquote regular students in terms of getting them back as well.
Yes. I'm hoping if we got inoculations in February and March, all the teachers are back in with shots and armor. We're opening up potentially, you know, if the rates go down and stuff, we open in March or April, you know.
Well, and I
Open
want
5 days a week.
sorry, Mike. I want to remind the board that, I mean, if things drastically change and we're all vaccinated, you know,
Yeah.
and you're right, Eric, every indication has that we are supposed to start receiving the vaccination in February. So say that is all complete by March and other factors change as well, the board could reconvene and make a different decision.
I certainly
So
would.
just know that I don't want to put a wrinkle into things, but that is absolutely an option. So while this is our decision for now, it's the decision for now, and that could potentially change as circumstances change.
Well said.
And then on another note, we keep talking about learning opportunities, and I think Eric and Raquel brought up social emotional learning in our students. I know we have part-time counselors at our elementary sites, and that was a huge endeavor that we had last year and this year. I would love for us to start looking into increasing our counselors at each one of those elementary sites to full-time, because when these students do come back and as they start coming back, they're going to need a lot of social emotional supports, and so will the teachers that work with them. So I'm not sure, that's direction for you to start looking into that and maybe bring that back when we talk about interventions.
And Stacy, just to clarify, we have full-time elementary counselors that service 2 school sites. So they're not part-time, they are
Well, they're full-time, but they're only part-time at that site.
Yes,
Am
you're
I correct?
exactly right.
That's what I meant, so.
Yes. And, you know, if there is an increase to our regular funding, that is something that would absolutely continue to be a priority for us. Could we do other mitigation factors with CARES money? Yes, potentially. So we can absolutely look into that as well.
Thank you.
So just briefly, I want to speak to the 2 intervention teachers per site. So I work at a school site that has 2 full-time intervention teachers. We are very lucky. Those are funded through their local PTAs, I believe. But anyway, so those teachers basically get to see groups of students for 30 or 40 minutes, 3 times a week. That's kind of what they get. That's like an intervention schedule with the 2 teachers, K6. That's kind of what you look at as the average service for those kids. I want to be really clear that I don't think when I'm talking about SPED cohorts, I'm talking about kids coming back to learn with their teacher for the mornings and that are in special day classes with their caseload providers that know them and that can service their IEP needs. That's what I'm talking about with cohorting. I'm not saying to do that now because the spread is at a crisis level and all the indicators, including our hospitals, are at crisis levels. So as the spread comes down, with clearly indicated, if it was at a 28 per 100,000, I know nobody wants to do a number now, but what I'm saying is we could definitely set a safe level of operating for small cohorts with our teachers involved in that. And then the intervention teachers could focus on the academics that they're delivering to students with English, who are English learners and who have other needs that are outside of the special education arena. It really is not the same, especially if you're talking about some of the students in a mod severe class. Their needs cannot be met by with all due respect, a new intervention teacher hired off the street. So that's my ongoing concern. That's why I asked that we have a strong plan to go forward and that we get it as soon as possible. And I would be happy to meet in between this meeting and next to flush it out too. But the 36 teachers is not what I consider meeting the special education needs. So that's the vision that I have as a board member.
Thank you, Eric. All right, are we ready to move on, board, to the next item, or any
Yeah, you
final
guys need to
comments?
break it all, or?
Well, we
No?
don't have that many items to do. I think we can get through
All right.
these.
Let's power on.
All right, have at it. All right, so moving on, and thank you, Dr. Levy, for that presentation. Moving on to 10, number 11, business. 11A, adoption of resolution number 19, 2021, establish a special reserve capital projects fund.
I will be doing all of the business items this evening, hopefully the first and last time that I'll be taking over the business section. So this is, it is recommended that the Board of Education adopt resolution number 19 for 2021. And this is due to several OUSD sites currently in asset management and available for purchase. It is necessary for us to create this special fund, which will actually be called Fund 40, for the potential proceeds of those real estate transactions. And this fund would provide for the accumulation of proceeds for capital outlay projects. Additionally, it could be used for salaries of school district employees. So bottom line is it's important that we establish this fund for the sale of properties that we are currently engaged in.
I'll move approval of establishing Fund 40.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mike and Eleanor. Any board discussion, questions? All right, I'll call for the vote. All in favor of establishing a special reserve capital project fund?
Aye.
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 All right, motion carries 5-0. Moving on to our next item, 11B, adoption of resolution number 20 for 2021. Establish Measure W Bond Oversight Committee and approve bylaws and guidelines for conduct of the committee.
Yes, thank you. It is recommended that the board establish the Measure W Bond Oversight Committee and approve the bylaws and guidelines for the conduct of the committee. We're very excited to be forming this, as this is the bond measure that was approved by our voters in the form of $160 million. Education code requires that upon declaration of the election results, which we did in December, that the boards shall establish and appoint an independent citizens oversight committee. The purpose to inform and advise the public and the district regarding expenditures of the bond revenue pursuant to Measure W. Upon adoption of this resolution, staff will begin the process of solicitation of applicants for the 7 positions on the Measure W Bond Oversight Committee, and information and applications for interested community members will be posted on our district website as of tomorrow. And I just want to inform the board that the committee will be made up of at least 7 members that ultimately shall be appointed by the Board of Education. And it's very clear in the bylaws that there needs to be 1 member from an Oceanside business organization, 1 member in an active senior citizens organization, 1 member active in a bona fide taxpayers organization, 1 member, parent guardian of a child currently enrolled in OUSD, and 1 member shall be a parent or guardian of a child currently enrolled in OUSD and active in a parent-teacher organization such as PTA, PTO, DPAC, et cetera. And then 2 members of the Oceanside community at large. The term of service is 2 years, and you must be at least 18 years or older to serve on the committee.
Would existing bond Prop H bond committee members be able to apply to be on the Prop W, or how is there a rollover potential? Or I'm interested in how that might work.
We have Counsel John Palmer on the call with us. And John, I'd like to throw that question to you, as we know that our current oversight committee for Prop H will need to run concurrently because there are projects that are in the queue that won't finish for a couple of years. So the question is, while that's running on a parallel track, could those same bond oversight committee members apply and be approved for the Measure W Bond Oversight Committee?
Yes, they could.
Simple answer, great, thank you. We should let our current folks know about it then, I would suggest. And then other folks that you know in the community too that might be interested in Prop W. So I'm sure there's some new folks that's come aboard with the Prop W effort that we all had there. So encourage a robust application pool.
I would agree with you in terms of encouraging new members, new people to be part of this committee. I think they'll have a different lens and a different relationship in terms of how those funds are going to be developed. I just think we need to open it up and really make it robust.
And just to remind the board, this is an oversight committee, just to ensure to the taxpayers that the funds that are expended from Measure W are expended per our legal obligations. They are not the ones determining how those funds are spent.
All right,
Great.
I'll entertain
Thank
a
you.
motion.
I'll move approval.
Do I have a second?
A second.
Thank you, Mike and Raquel. I'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Palmer,
John.
for joining us.
Thank you, John.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Julie.
Have a nice evening.
You too.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to our next item, 11C, adoption of resolution number 21 for 2021, authorizing staff to proceed with transfer of property, the Pioneer Cemetery, and making related findings.
Yes, so if you'll allow me to just explain this a little bit, but we are recommending that the board authorize staff to proceed with the transfer of property of Pioneer Cemetery and making related findings. So the district desires to convey surplus real property identified by the assessor's parcel number, doesn't have an address, of 158-080-02-00, and located on Rancho del Oro Drive in the city of Oceanside, the property commonly known as Pioneer Cemetery. As you recall, the board appointed a Facilities Advisory 711 committee to review the property and provide recommendations in regard to the limits of its use and disposition. In November of 2019, the Board of Education approved resolution 09-1920 to identify current district property, Pioneer Cemetery, as potential surplus. And in April of 2020, after review of the committee's recommendation, the board agreed that the property has no beneficial educational school uses, and that the Oceanside Historical Society is the appropriate party to own, maintain, and administrate the workings of the property as a historical public cemetery. So we've been working on this for over a year and a half. And just to give some historical perspective, the San Luis Rey Township was a vital, busy place in the 1870s. Many families came to settle around the area to homestead. The township had a post office, a hotel, a newspaper called the San Luis Rey Star, and a general store. Some point in the late 1860s, land was designated for a cemetery on a small hill just southwest of the mission. In 1875, the owner donated the land to reserve for public burying ground or cemetery, where the same is now used for that purpose. The following year, the cemetery was deeded to the San Luis Rey School District to hold trust for a public burying ground. So that was in 1876, and Oceanside didn't actually become a city until 1888. So that's why the land was given to the public entity that existed, which was the San Luis Rey School District. In the late 1940s, the Oceanside Unified School District took over the San Luis Rey School District and unknowingly became trustees of the cemetery.
No title report.
About 50 years later, the Oceanside Historical Society formed a cleanup crew, and they've really been managing and caring for this property for the last 30 years. And they have, through much conversation and love and caretaking of this property, decided that they do want to be own, maintain, and administrate the workings of this historical asset for the city of Oceanside.
Wonderful. I'll move approval of the transfer, and thank to Christy Hawthorne and John Daly of the Historic Society and many other folks there who agreed to step up and take this on.
I would second and also say thank you so much for staff for working on this. This is a unique situation to say the least.
For
And I think
sure.
it came down on the right side. I also want to thank you for the historical lesson. That was the best surprise of the meeting. Appreciate that.
All
I
right.
want to also acknowledge our attorney, Sarah Polito from Fagan, Friedman, and Full Frost did an immense amount of research and effort on this. And Sarah, thank you for leading us through this very complicated historical history project. I know you had to do a lot of research and the original documents were fascinating. So I just really want to thank you for that effort.
Yeah, thank you. It was my pleasure. I was glad to be able to help with it.
Super. Thanks. All right. I'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. We're on the last item on our agenda, and this is public comments on non-agenda items. Anne, how many people do we have?
We have 4.
4. So I'm looking at the board. Can we sit through these, or do we need a 5-minute biology break?
I'm okay.
Let's continue on.
Okay. Okay. Since I'm not hearing, we'll start. Go ahead, Anne.
Okay. Amanda Malaski, Jeremy McCutcheon, Michael Mitchell, and Sandra Carmona.
All right, Amanda, you're on mute. Amanda, now unmute yourself. There you go.
She's still muted.
Yep, you're still muted.
There we go.
There we
There you go. There you go.
Hi, my name is Amanda Maslowski. There's a lot of different things I'd like to discuss today, but specifically, I just really want to talk about the special needs program. I have a 4-year-old son that attends a pre-K special needs program in the district. To date, he has received less than 14 hours from November to December. Prior to March, he received 12 hours a day or a week, 3 hours a day. He's autistic, nonverbal. He has limited receptive language, ADHD, and a learning disability. Prior to COVID, he was improving in all areas by leaps and bounds. 30 days forward, he had a huge regression. We've seen and still see many behavior issues that could perhaps be decreased if he had his normal structured school schedule. He has an adaptive PE teacher, a PT teacher, an occupational therapist, a speech therapist, and a regular teacher, his special needs teacher. And I'm only one person. I'm doing my best for him every single day, but it's not enough. He needs his teachers and he needs to be with his peers to continue to develop his social emotional skills. Can you guys, I'm sorry, they're both in here because it's so late. they want to go to bed. I fear that the longer that we keep the kids out of school, that we will all be paying for it for years to come. With that said, now we're back to 45-minute offerings twice a week, with the rest of the week being an option for virtual, which for him, it just does not work. Virtual school does not compute with him, and it's been a struggle since the beginning. With his IEP, he's not receiving all of his services per his IEP. And we just met again recently and we were granted extra time, which is amazing. You guys need to get out. I'm just not sure how he's gonna be honored that extra time, because he's at this point still not receiving all of his services again per his IEP. And just to touch on what Elaine Keswick had discussed earlier, researching all of the surrounding school districts, we were able to find that they were all able to safely return back to school full time, 4 days a week, most of them 3 hours each session. I'm running out of time here. So I just wanted to basically ask the board that we please make special needs pre-K in particular a priority going forward, and considering how we can get them back safely.
Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you.
All right, our next public comment.
Jeremy?
Here you go.
Mr. McCutcheon, you're up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to voice a couple concerns I have regarding the presentation. One of them is regarding the practical solutions, bringing our kids back to school. You know, I haven't seen anybody really besides Eric that really has a voice in our kids. I don't understand why we're not putting our kids first. There's very little transparency as to what's holding Oceanside from coming up to par with the rest of the schools. You all need to create a solution. You know, you all need to work together. You know, I know that there's different opinions, but at the end of the day, it's the kids need to come first. You know, one thing I notice is, you know, regarding the attendance rate, sure, we log our son on and sure that equates to 100% attendance, but that's 0% absorption. You know, special education with our son, you can't do that online. There's no real learning going on with him. He needs to be in person. So I just want to make that point. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Michael Mitchell, you're up. Go ahead.
Good evening. Good evening, Dr. Vitale. Good evening, Dr. Lovey. Good evening, board. First, before I begin, with the topic that I'm speaking on, I'm requesting follow-up from the staff and requesting follow-up from the board. I'm speaking, I'm Michael Mitchell. I have two kids that are in the dual immersion program at Reynolds Elementary. And with the dual immersion program that Oceanside Unified School District uses, they use the 90-10 model. And so basically, 90% instruction in Spanish, starting kindergarten, 10% in English, and it slides down to basically where it's 50-50 in the 5th grade. A key component of this program is in-person language immersion, where they are fully immersed in the Spanish language from the teacher, from their peers, and learning from one another. And no fault of any of the teachers. The teachers have been excellent, but one of the key components that is missing is that even with the best of situations, the virtual learning does not allow for that in-person immersion inside of the classroom, that in-person experience when it comes to that language learning, which is so critical for the building blocks from kindergarten to 5th grade. And so what I'm requesting succinctly is that before we go back to in-person learning, that the immersion program, the learning part is reassessed. And what I'm saying is this, is that say, for example, if you have a child in 1st grade, it's 80-20. And then when you move to 2nd grade, it's 70-30. So what I'm requesting is this, that we have more immersion because of that lack of in-person immersion learning, as we have been for the past year, have it reassessed, and so that we have more immersion for our kids, and that it's not sliding down. So by the time they're in 5th grade, they don't have that full immersion experience in comparison to those who were in the program and weren't affected by COVID and have already progressed out of the immersion program. I know it's a small cohort that has progressed out, but I'm just saying that those who are in the program right now and have been affected by COVID, that we reassess, give them more immersion once we return in person, and then go forward from there. So that's the end of my comment. Thank you for your time, and hopefully we can come up with a solution.
Thank you, Michael.
Then Sandra. Oh,
No.
Dr. Begin, Sandra Carmona is not in the room. She was here earlier, but she's left. I was the last speaker.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, that concludes our meeting. Unless we have any more board discussion, I'll throw that out.
I do have two things I wanted to bring up. First, I want to make sure everybody knows to submit their names for San Luis Rey, the renaming of San Luis Rey Elementary. I forgot to mention that in the board reports. We're really excited. We've already received a lot of great responses, so it's awesome and exciting. Number two, I had a question for staff on the schools that we currently charter. What are the names of the schools that we are currently chartering as our district?
Coastal Academy and Pacific View.
And when I investigated Coastal Academy's website, I did not see a COVID dashboard where they would report out cases of their students. And so I would like to see if we can, I would like to provide them the direction to put a COVID dashboard up, especially since they do see some students per cohorting guidance, I believe. So for the safety of our community, I think we should provide them that guidance if at all possible.
Mercedes, help me recall. Yeah, Eric, I hear you. And yes, we will make that phone call. I believe it's required for K-12 schools, is it not?
Yes, it was only required as of January 1st. We'll definitely, 10 days ago, or 11 days ago, we will definitely call to remind. Most other public schools had done it before. So we will definitely call and reach out to them.
And we will also put that in writing.
Absolutely.
I'd also like to give them suggestions on best practices for that COVID dashboard, because that can also be variable between district to district. Why don't we just ask the state to do that too while we're at it? Maybe that comes down in our new guidance, maybe not, but I would like to make sure that we are protecting the community, and they are our charge. So thank you.
Thank you. We'll provide a copy of what we prepared for our district. We feel that it's tied to best practices, and Mr. Jennings has done a great job of keeping that. We will provide that as guidance to them in writing.
All right, any more board discussion?
Oh,
I
good
want to thank,
future.
go ahead.
On the future, I know there's a lot of movement in the athletics department, so I'd like to hear more about what we are doing and planning with athletics in our future meeting. And I know that we are permitted under our current guidance to bring back 25% of secondary students for in-person opportunities for cohorting too. So I just wanted to say that I hope we can talk about that at our next meeting as well.
And COVID-19 updates have been added to our agendas. So at each meeting, we will be discussing it. Thanks, Eric. I just wanted to say thank you to my fellow board members and to the staff for the presentation and, sitting in, making these hard decisions. So it's not easy. Thank you. I'm going to adjourn the meeting. Have a nice night, and thank you for joining us.